An aspect about this that can be difficult is that I have a lot of memories, but then I don't always remember them on the spot. Like I might say something, do something, hear something, be talking to someone, my parents might tell a story, and it'll spark another memory. So it's hard because I feel like in what now, maybe 5 or 6 episodes, we've already talked through Egypt and Africa. I feel like Africa had so much more happen. There's aspects about the church, there's aspects about living there. The one last thing I might say about Africa is I feel like, I could be wrong about this, but I feel like when we left, it was sudden. I'm pretty sure we left right around when things were still unstable with the government. I'm pretty sure it was at the end of that though, not necessarily right at the beginning. But I could be wrong about that. I'm sure my mom or dad might see this and be able to comment. But yeah, I feel like it's kind of hard because there's probably more that I could come back to and tell you about Africa. The thing for me is that, how do I put this? That was probably when I started realizing that my parents were missionaries and what that meant. I got to see more of my dad doing ministry. I got to see more of people who had to make sacrifices for becoming a believer by, basically being kicked out of their family. I got to watch how my dad interacted with people, how my mom interacted with people, how people coming over to our house, what that meant, what that looked like, what ministry looked like. All of a sudden I started seeing it and understanding that this was our life. At the time, I don't think I necessarily was super aware that it was missions work, but looking back, I can see how it definitely has affected and impacted my choices, decisions, and beliefs. I'll even put it this way. There's an aspect where I married a Southern woman who is very hospitable, and she might not necessarily always feel she's that way, or agree with me in that, but I feel like she's very hospitable. She very much wants her home to be a place that people feel comfortable, and that is important to me in all aspects of life. So before we go on to the next country where we moved to, we actually went back to the States. And we did go back to the States between Egypt and Africa as well, but I don't remember that as much. I think just because of how young I was. Excuse me. I do remember, however, the time between Africa and Kazakhstan. Mostly because that was I think it was my middle school years. Yeah, because it was like 6th grade. And I remember how difficult it was coming back to America. One of the things that is like the iconic story that actually happened to me, to my friends at school. So we came back to the States, and my parents put me in a private Christian school at the church where my dad grew up. And I remember they were talking about Michael Jordan and Bo Jackson. And I kind of looked at him and was like, who are those? Who is that? Who are those guys? And they were like, what do you mean? You don't know? Like, it was like this moment of like, how do you not know who these people are? And looking back, it's funny because it's definitely the iconic story of, the missionary kid who has been out of the country long enough that he doesn't know who's popular sports stars or movie stars. Basically any game currently that exists that is revolving around your knowledge of pop culture and historical pop culture. I don't like playing it because I basically lose. I don't know anything when it comes to all that stuff. Every now and then there's different like TV shows or cartoons, I should say, that I do know about because we would come back to the States and watch them. I think during that period of between Africa and Kazakhstan, which is where my parents went next, that there was a lot more of like getting exposed to Saturday morning cartoons and Captain America and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and a lot more of the 90s shows. So the classic ones I know enough about, but if there was some odd one that was really popular for a short while that I missed, I'll have no clue. That aspect of being a missionary kid for the longest time was tough I don't feel like I still don't always feel like I fit in. I still, 10, 20 years after being a missionary kid, use that as an excuse when there's something that comes up that I don't know about, such as pop culture references or historical things that I'm not sure what they are. I'll be like, oh, I don't know, I was a missionary kid. I don't know that. But that definitely has played into thoughts and ideas. We've talked about the risks of being a missionary and taking your family overseas. There's an aspect there for my own kids. It's like, I want them to see the world. Trust me, I want them to have a bigger world view than just the small town America that I know a lot of students who have. Not of their own fault, but basically I want my kids to be able to see the world. But at the same time, I know that means that there might be things they miss out on in America. It's a win-win and it's a lose-lose. So yeah, it definitely plays into the thoughts that I have about that. I think we'll talk about that for a little bit longer, about just how being a missionary kid, what the impacts are, and what that little span of living in the States was like. Because that was a pretty big deal for me in my life. So we'll talk to you next time.